Afternoon, Adam. All well?
Oh, well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, very good indeed. So, what have we got here for the case study? This is a student of yours, right?
This is a student of mine. Been coaching him since he's about 14. He's now in his late 20s. He's a Scratch Handicap player, but has been really struggling sort of the last year or so with directional issues, especially on the golf course.
Okay.
Has a tremendous amount of speed. We're talking 126, 128 miles per hour driver club head speed, over 100 miles an hour with his 7-iron.
Yeah.
And really what we've tried to focus on over the last year or so is sort of stability and sequencing in the golf swing.
Okay.
When he gets on the golf course, he can properly spray it, obviously with that kind of speed. And yeah, and it's just a question of trying to get him to have at least some sort of consistent direction. He can miss both ways. He doesn't know where it's going to go, especially with the long clubs. And that's turned in, and now he's struggling to break 80 at the moment.
Okay. So what shot shape does he want to hit? Let's start there.
Well, I think he's always tried to hit a bit of a fade to try and keep the ball on the ballpark. So he's sort of intentionally come a little bit steep, a little bit outside it. But I think he would want to just naturally hit a small draw or a small controlled fade.
Okay. So, I mean, just in terms of looking at his data, if we're going to, I think it's important that we work towards a specific shot shape, because that's obviously going to help guide me particularly from a start position perspective, but also from the perspective of figuring out which components to change. So he's healthy, no injuries? Yeah,
he's healthy, he's very fit, he's very strong.
Okay.
Does a lot of working out, very golf specific. And, he's a proper practicer as well, so he's able to change things pretty quickly.
Perfect student.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at his data then, so we've got 7-iron here. He's got a ton of speed, obviously. If we're going to hit draw, there's a number of things that I'm looking at here. For someone of his speed to have a 3.5 down attack angle, that's just a little too shallow an attack angle for me, and I think that needs to beef up, which is obviously going to be very good if we're working towards a draw shape. Getting the attack angle more down will help get the path more to the right. My gut feeling is one of the reasons he's missing it both ways is that his impact data is just too neutral. So with that speed, I mean, basically a one left path, with that speed, he's got to be so good at lining his face up. And if that shifts 1 or 2 degrees left or right of the path, he's going to have a huge dispersion zone. So what I would look to do initially is get him to a position where we get his swing direction to 0, which straight away will shift the path more to the right. If we get his swing direction to 0 and we get his attack angle to sort of north of 5 degrees down, then he's going to have a proper draw path. That's going to see the path shift to sort of 3-4 degrees to the right, which gives him much more scope. Basically, the gap between path and target becomes bigger, so he's got much more room to line the club face up, and he's got a much bigger gap to line the club face up in, which I think will help someone of that much speed. So basically everything I'm going to look at here, Adam, is going to be related to getting the swing direction back to 0 and getting the attack angle slightly steeper. Clearly, with someone with this much speed, there's no point in trying to cost him speed. That's a superpower. We just need to give him a little bit more control. And giving him bigger path numbers will definitely help him there, because then, as I said, he's got that bigger gap between target and path to fit the face in. So we are going to take a quick look at what we've got here. So initially, just going to look at start position, as I do with every player. Is the start position appropriate for what we're trying to achieve? Now, I would say that, I mean, this is the sort of typical analysis process that I'll go through. So I'm looking off the bat at, is there anything in start position that is causing him to struggle to hit draw shots, or struggle to control the face? And okay, so let me just get these synced up. I think it's going to be relatively easy to get him in a position where he can hit draw quite quickly. From a start position perspective, I think we can possibly explore the shaft position and the ball position, because I think in real terms that ball position is probably a little bit too far forward. If he's trying to hit a draw shot, he can certainly move it back so that the back of the ball is on that line. That would be my first observation. And also that would encourage him to lean the shaft more, which will give him two wins, and it will help shift the path right. It will also help him hit down on it. It's the hitting down that's going to help the path go to the right. Also, having that ball a little bit further back should straighten up the swing direction. So that would be the first comment I'd make, is that we need to get him in a start position that is much more appropriate for the shot shape he's trying to hit. The remainder of his setup from front on I really like. There's nothing in there that bothers me at all. His head is nicely centered above his spine, above his pelvis. His shoulders are in a pretty decent position relative to his feet. So nothing else that I'm seeing there that bothers me. Down the line, I think there's one thing we could definitely do which would help him, and that would be to get the shaft a little taller. I think that would be, again, another component that would help him shift the path to the right, because it will help straighten out swing direction.
Does that mean his hands a little higher than at the setup?
Yeah, I think so, because I suspect what we see as he gets into motion is, because the hands are so low, we're probably going to see the club stand up a little bit, which it does. I think, as I said, let's just get rid of that characteristic by trying to get the handle a little bit higher to start with. I think that will really help him. So there's three very obvious components here that will help him: ball position, and then we're looking at the shaft and handle position, more towards the target and a little bit higher. Just to give you a guideline, I would want to see his ball position. I'd want to see the back of the ball under his sternum for draw. Now, in ball position terms, you've actually got quite a lot of leeway depending on players' build, swing shape, and what he's trying to do with the golf ball. But that can go further back, and he's got so much speed that he's not going to have any problem launching it from there. So that would be my first observations. Any questions so far?
No, I think the ball position has crept a little bit further forward because of what's happened in the past. As he's been so quick with his lower body, that his upper body has almost gone backwards a little bit, and his sternum's gone behind the ball. And what we've done is, he's worked very hard to sort of get his upper body more on top of the ball. And I think it's crept forward because he feels like he can hit it straighter when he's covering the ball a little bit more in impact. And that's encouraged him to move forward into the ball. I think forward.
To be honest, I think it's important. It's from a coaching perspective, it's important that we understand that appropriate start position will give the player access to two conditions. Number one, it will give them appropriate access to the appropriate impact geometry. And number two, it will give them access to better movement options. Now, it doesn't mean the player is necessarily going to use them, but you at least have to give them access. I think it would be very difficult to get this guy to hit a functional draw without shifting ball, shaft, and handle position. So that would be my first comments. Now, when we start to look at the swing in motion, I'm going to just run through my basic analysis, which revolves looking at how the lead shoulder works, because this to me is a very key guideline. So you can see I put that crosshair through the lead shoulder, and let's just play it and see. So again, if you're looking for a component in backswing that is not favouring or not encouraging him to draw, I would say the amount of move behind the ball, that again is going to shallow it. That's a shallowing component, and that will probably mean that the path is going to, or the swing direction is going to struggle to go to the right. And basically what I was expecting to seeing from that is exactly what's happened. By the time he's got the club back into what I call delivery, some coaches would refer to it as P6, his lead shoulder is too far back of its start position to be able to draw it. So basically, the more that the lead shoulder moves in that direction in transition, the more draw bias that would be. Now, obviously, if he's going to shift off it to the extent he does, then getting back to that is going to be harder and harder and harder. So not only is that compromising the impact geometry, it's also compromising his ability to strike down on the ball to start it right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's quite extreme, because that is something we've worked on hard, is keeping him much more centered over the ball, you know, hitting shots with his left eye closed so that he, you know, he stays centered.
Well, I think that basically you've got to really push the pivot side of things here, mate.
Yeah.
Because again, he's a good athlete. He looks reasonably tall. Is that right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So he's a good athlete who's reasonably tall. That getting him to stay centered will really, really help him. And I think getting him, I mean, it may even be worthwhile exploring him, just getting him to lean on the left leg a fraction more at setup to help him with this. The kind of drill I'd be looking for you to do as far as stabilizing that pivot, I'd just hold a pool noodle or a stick against the left side of his head and get him to stay on that. I suspect if you quiz him, one of the things that it's quite often the case here, that a lot of players shift that far right in a bid to find turn. And as you can see, there's no excess. I mean, there's no issue with turn there whatsoever. He could actually benefit from probably turning a little less through the torso. So simple drills, something on the side of his head. I would actually encourage him, I think, to do some practice with someone holding his cap, because the amount of turn he's got means that he stands up a little bit in backswing. As you see, that red line went through his ear to start, which causes him to lose left side bend, which is another component that is going to make it very difficult to hit down on the ball. So he's really, I mean, it's in a way, it's quite an easy golf swing to analyze, because pretty much everything that he does from a start and a movement perspective correlates precisely with what we're seeing at impact.
Yeah.
So that would really be where I would go with this guy, Adam. I think he's clearly a good athlete. He clearly knows how to move a golf club and strike a golf ball, but his geometry at setup is poor, and the couple of movement options that he's decided on in the backswing, primarily the amount of shift and lift in the head, definitely needs addressing. So if we look at it there, and then by top of backswing, he's moved quite a significant amount. His right ear has come a long way away from its start position. I think because of the amount of turn and the amount of shift, if we can stabilize that, again, he's in a position to neutralize swing direction, hit down on it more, which will give him that much further right path. It's worth bearing in mind that with players that are this quick, working to very, very narrow impact tolerances is generally not a good idea. So if he's, as an example, if he was a 0 degree path guy, his face control and strike control has got to be exceptional for him not to miss it both ways. And that's exactly what he's experiencing here. That one left path is nowhere near enough to C shape, and it's basically handcuffing him in terms of his impact position. He's got to work so freaking hard and be so consistent to have control over it. Because literally misaligning the face by a couple of degrees or misstriking it by 3 or 4 millimeters could result in the thing disappearing into the trees.
Yeah, he has the tendency that he'll pull it with a really decent strike.
Yeah.
And then as a compensation, he'll manipulate it out to the right. And then he'll hit like a toe strike push. Yeah. And it's gone. Yeah. It's gone. Yeah.
And everything we're seeing sort of from top of backswing down the way, I think, is a response to the pivot. In terms of his long-term development, number one, can he start to it in an appropriate manner every single time? Number two, can we shorten the backswing turn and stabilize the pivot more? And then number three, we'd have to start exploring how we get that lead shoulder back. And also I would be exploring how much lag he creates. He's got tons of speed. He doesn't need lag for speed. And I think that speed is part of that lag that we're seeing there is part of the issue from his ball control perspective as well. But I would very much be looking at quality of pivot first of all before we did anything else.
And what kind of drills would you be looking at to get that left shoulder moving sort of up, forward and up?
Well, initially I probably wouldn't do anything, because my gut says that if he was to stabilize his pivot, there's a very decent chance that lead shoulder would pop out into better place where when the club's parallel to the floor, so P6, right? Mm-hmm. So For a draw player of speed, that is basically where I would expect to see the lead shoulder at 6, that yellow dot.
Right.
Now, given he's moved more than that in the backswing, I think if the backswing was stable, he would get back there quite easily.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, I think the next step in his progression, once the pivot is a little bit more stable, would be to explore what he does in transition in terms of pulling the handle down, because I think there's definitely some issues in there that can be looked at. But I mean, I know it's my coaching bias, but given that setup determines those two things, impact geometry and movement options, I'm not going to ask the guy to change the way he moves until I'm sure that his start position is appropriate for what he's wanting to do with the club and the ball. And just now, there is nothing about the way he moves or starts to it that's going to produce a push draw. And I would definitely not be slowing him down, but because of his speed, working to that very, very neutral impact shape that he's got just now gives him zero freedom. It doesn't take an awful lot in terms of strike or face alignment for him to be hitting it up a tree.
Yeah, we've had this discussion many times about him wanting to be more neutral through the ball, and I've said to him that he just swings too fast because that club face that club face position at that speed, it only needs half a degree or a degree in change of face angle, and it is off the planet.
Yeah, I mean, it literally is in another country. But if you look at the sort of high-speed players at the top of the game, they either work the ball specifically one way, so a kind of, I guess, Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka John Ram would be a good example of that. That's not me suggesting that they can't get it to move the opposite way, but they tend to bias towards, John Ram's a good example, quite a lot of the same shape every time. If you watched him at the Open a couple of weeks ago, the shot tracer showed an awful lot of cut spin, an awful lot of the time. So they're very good at producing one quite sizable shape, or they're able to access a Bubba Watson, for example, who can access any shape, but again, he's playing with quite a lot of shape. I don't see that many high-speed players that can get away with basically a zero impact. And I think that if you can get him hitting down on it, that in itself, the sort of pulling force required to hit down on it will actually really help him stabilize the face. We should get to a position quite quickly where he eliminates the left miss. Now, he might have a few sizable right misses in the short term while he's adjusting to how he puts the club on the ball. But I think if you can action the stuff we've just discussed, then we should probably eliminate one side of the golf course, which is an east star. Then you can start to, once he's accustomed to hitting down on it more, getting a more, I guess, for want of a better word, compressed strike, then you can start to work on aligning the face relative to that swing direction, attack angle geometry, to give him a chance of playing more effectively, playing a simpler game of golf rather than having to worry about whether it's going to miss left or right.
And if he was, if in terms of the positions he's in at the moment, he decided he wanted to fade the ball, what would, obviously still centeredness of rotation in the backswing would still be key. Left shoulder position would be key. But what would be the other areas then that you would, if he says, no, listen, I can't draw it, I'm going to, because he's obviously got so much speed that whether he draws or fades it, he's absolutely fine in terms of distance.
I would probably start by setting the handle back a little bit more, so the handle is basically vertical.
Okay.
That would fall into the fade component category. I would definitely be getting to stabilize the pivot. That to me is non-negotiable. The big thing that I would be working on is the amount he lags the club in transition.
Right.
Because that really is, again, that would be much more of a draw bias characteristic than a fade. Anyone who fades the ball with a P5 to 6 that looks like this is generally hitting a push fade.
Yeah. Okay.
A hang-on push fade. So yeah, I'd be looking to eliminate some of that lag, that pull down of the handle, which will help him orientate the face better for fade.
Okay.
But again, I'll happily admit this is my bias. I much prefer to see good high-speed players hitting draws when the ball's on the ground, because you're hitting down on it. So straight away, that shifts the path to the right of the swing direction, which straight away in my simple little brain suggests that we should be playing a draw shape. Because we can manage a 0 swing direction, then hitting down 5 degrees at this speed with a 7-iron, he's going to have a 3.5 to 4 right path. And that gives him all of that space to line the club face up in.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of what you're doing when you next see him, the numbers that you need to explore would be attack angle and swing direction. So I'd want to see swing direction getting to 0, attack angle getting north of 5.
North of 5, because you can see his average there is
it's got to be north of 5.
Okay.
And to be honest, with this speed hitting a draw, he could quite easily get to 6 or 7.
With his irons.
Swing direction is absolutely crucial. That needs to shift to 0. That should straight away shift the path to the right. Even if he's only hits down on it 3.5 degrees like this shot, the path will be right at target. If we can get the path to 4 degrees right, as I said, he's suddenly got a ton of space to fit the face in, which will, that's basically going to make the game more playable. Yeah,
because obviously on the range, when he's hitting loads of balls and his timing's on, he can really just hit anything. But the minute he gets under pressure or on a tight hold,
well, that's going to be the biggest issue here. I think that, as I said, it's going to be a real problem to control that.
Cool, great.
That makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, let me know how you get on with it.
Will do. Thank you.
And if there's any, if you want me to look at anything or you get any questions once you've started to pick away at it, then please let me know. But I think it's a relatively straightforward process there. But it's important to me that from my coaching perspective, it's done in a very specific order, and you're able to manage the change. So let's shift start position, then we can get to work on pivot. Once we've got that pivot, then and that becomes a little bit more of a habit, we're then going to be in a position to know where to take it next. So set up, pivot. Hopefully, and I'm pretty sure that if he pivots better, the left shoulder is going to get in a better position at 6. He can get into that position, then the path's going to be more appropriate, and then you can get to work on refining where he lines the face up.
Yeah. Very good.
So next step, that's simple. Just keep in touch with progress with him. As I said, if you've got any questions, you can send them over, and if you want me to sort of double check a couple of videos once in a while, by all means send them over and I'll take a look.
That would be brilliant. Yeah, once we made a few of the small changes, then maybe to check in and have a look at that.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Adam. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you need, just give us a shout.
Will do. Thanks a lot.